All right, everybody, welcome back to Ask Brojo Anything. Thank you guys so much for sending your questions through. You've given us plenty of fodder. We've got actually a pretty big wait list. So we try to get through two at least every week. And as always, prioritizing our gold members. And then if we've got time, get into the other questions. But yeah, if you want your questions answered, join gold. There's a total money back guarantee on your first month, so you can just try it out for a month, and if you don't like it, you can bail. If you do like it, you can stay. And part of that is getting your questions answered by us wise old men. Let's do it.
I'll dive into this one a bit, read it out. It's another fairly complex situation with a number of different people involved, similar in some ways to our last question. This one is regarding a conflict of respect. So the person who sent this in basically feels that they're in a situation where they are showing a lot of respect to another worker. I think it's a coworker or a friend, but is not getting respect back. And we've all experienced this, and it's a very trying situation, oftentimes fueled by nice guy syndrome, which we have to watch out for. And basically, this question was framed quite interestingly. He presented three possible ways to approach the situation, which is great. From his perspective, the first option was respect them less. Show them less respect than you are in the past because you're not getting it back. So you balance the relationship by lowering your level of respect towards them. Second option was remain who you are, keep your level of respect until they come up to match, in hopes that they will come to match you at some point, recognizing that, hey, this is definitely the right way to be a part of this relationship. And the third option was be prepared for replacement regardless of any project in connection. So I assume that means bail, either him leaving the company and the project, or perhaps seeking to have the other person removed from the project and or the company. This situation looks very clear to be a co-worker situation, two people on a project, and the dynamics aren't working. Dan, what's your take?
Yeah, it's a good question. I think this one comes up a lot more than we hear about, which is a lot of people take option number one. They try to respect someone, they don't get in return, so they reduce their own respect as kind of revenge or some way to sort of balance the scales. It's kind of justice. Like if someone treats me like shit, I'll treat them like shit. In terms of integrity, that's a very poor approach. For a start, it means that your values are conditional. You're willing to sacrifice them if other people don't live by them, which means you actually have very weak grip on your values. And it also means you're not giving. It means you're indebting. You only give if people give back, which means you're loaning out your values. And if they're not paid back, you take them back. That being said, a lot of people confuse respect with people pleasing. So they say someone's not reciprocating. What they mean is they're not being as nice to me as I'm being to them, but your niceness isn't the same as being respectful. For example, if you help someone a lot, that's not the same as respect. Maybe respect is letting them do it on their own or waiting for them to ask for help. If you fix people without their permission, that's definitely not respect. That means you're judging them as weaker than you, and so on. So there's a lot of people who think they're being respectful when they're really being nice in a manipulative way. It's definitely not the same thing. But regardless, I rule out option number one. Don't let somebody else sacrifice your core values in general. Their behavior should be irrelevant to you living by your values. What might be relevant is who you direct that attention towards. If I have two people, one of them reciprocates my respect and one of them doesn't, guess who I'm inviting to dinner? Guess who I'll call on the phone? Guess who I'm going to spend more time with and give more of my energy and attention to? The one who reciprocates. It's actually a qualifying system. I respect people, If they don't respect me back, they're basically saying, let's not be friends. Now, I'm not saying you ignore the person, but there is a minimum level of respect, and then there's the bonuses you give to special people. And this is one of the things I sort of keep in mind. It happens with coaching all the time. I reach out and try to help as many people as I can. Some of them like that help. I'll give them more attention. If somebody pushes back against my help, I'll give them less. In fact, I'm respecting them by doing so. They're saying, go away, basically. They're saying, I don't want any part of this, or I'm certainly not willing to invest what you're willing to invest. They're basically saying, not me. Go choose somebody else. And that's nothing that needs to be taken personally. The final point I'll make, I think, is that respect must always be two ways. While you respect others, it cannot come at the cost of disrespecting yourself. So you have to always have a clear definition in your head around what self-respect means. And respecting others must not compromise that, and vice versa. Respecting yourself cannot be a disrespect to others. Respecting others cannot be a disrespect to yourself. It's like a mystery that needs to be solved. How do I behave in a way that is simultaneously respecting of others and of myself? Because if it's respecting of myself, then I don't need them to reciprocate. There's no hole for them to fill. My cup is filled internally by me. I'm already full of respect. And of course, if I take it away from others, I wouldn't be living with integrity. If I was to disrespect other people, that's not how I want to be treated. So I'd be out of alignment with my integrity. So if I can get both happening at the same time, which is actually usually the key, if I respect someone else, I'll respect myself for doing that. Problem solved. It doesn't matter what they do. What they do is an additional event. It's not related. That's my first kind of ranting reaction to that.
Yeah, I fully agree with that. And in fact, the question of integrity is a really interesting one. When I think of integrity, I like to think of something that is, in a very natural way, has really found its roots and its place in the world, like an oak tree. If you have an oak tree sitting in your lawn and you chuck some corn seeds next to it and that corn starts to grow, the oak tree isn't going to move. To me, that's what integrity is about. Nothing that changes in the world around that oak tree is going to convince that oak tree that it needs to be less of an oak tree. That's the mentality that you want to have in this situation. And workplace situations are rife with confrontation, at least as much as romantic relationships, because there's a lot of stress. You've got deadlines, you've got financial concerns, your boss is having a bad day, the water cooler's out of juice, whatever it is. There's constantly stuff going on. And this is constantly going to affect your world. So expect there to be confrontations, expect there to be conflict, and hold your own. Know who you are and be consistent. One of the most valuable things about integrity is that everyone knows, everyone around you always knows who they're dealing with. They know what it takes for you to be happy. They know what it takes to recruit your attention and your effort and your strength on their side. For you, respect is important. If you show that and demonstrate that and essentially demand that consistently, people know exactly how to work with you. Whereas we've all had that one coworker who's very random and literally we just avoid them because they're kind of the rabid dog. We just never know what to do with this person. There's one thing I'd like to call out about this message, though, that I think is very important, which is everyone's got a different definition of what respect is. And I think this is very important because your idea of you giving respect to this person and your idea that they are not giving respect to you is very much something that's happening inside your head. It's very difficult for us to see without examples. There weren't any given here, or without watching and observing the interactions between you, whether there was intentional disrespect or whether the other person knew they were being disrespectful, or whether they could even see that you were respecting them. Those dynamics are very, very subjectively assessed. So your subjective assessment of this interaction is that you're giving and you're not getting back an equal and balanced relationship. And you may be absolutely right, but you may be absolutely wrong. And it's important to recognize that. If you were to sit down with them and say, hey, I'd really like to have a great workplace dynamic here. Respect is really important to me. I feel like I'm making a very strong effort to show you respect all the time. I feel like I'm not getting that back. Here's an example of where I felt disrespected. Now, if you do this in a good way, where the other person can at least see things through your eyes, they can quite possibly correct things, or at least give you some feedback on where you are misinterpreting the situation. The positive effect here is it lets you release a bit of steam, a bit of emotional steam. You're actually being honest and authentic. Just as we addressed in the previous question, sharing what you're feeling is very important. Others can't see inside your emotional brain until you blow up, which is a bad day for everyone. And it also gives them a chance to see how their behavior looks from the outside, which most people don't know. So being honest, being authentic is very important, but being very, very aware that you might be wrong in your interpretation of what's happening here is a very important starting place for any confrontation. All you have in any confrontation is what you see through your own eyes and what thoughts happen inside your own head. You have no idea what's going on for this other person. You have no idea how they grew up, what they're looking for, what their cultural situation is, how their mind works, how they deal with their emotions. And I see this all the time because particularly in technical companies, you have some people that they're all about the project. And they sound abrupt and rude and almost downright cruel and abusive because they're all about hit that goal, hit that deadline, hit that budget. That's it. That's all they care about. And they end up sacrificing people in the process without even being aware. Other people in that same team are all about the people and are really suffering because they see all these wrongs and injustices happening. But it's a matter of perspective. The only way to solve it is through really, really good communication continuously.
I basically couldn't agree more. You've brought up a good point. You can't even say you're being disrespected yet. Because the only way you know you're being disrespected is if the two of you come to a clear agreement and then the agreement is breached. So this is the key. You don't actually need to have an objective identification of an objective definition of respect. You need an agreed upon definition. It amazes me, especially in workplace relationships, how rare it is for people to sit down and go, what does respect mean to you? Let's come to an agreement on how we're going to treat each other. It's funny, I did this when I was a manager in corrections, and all of my staff said, nobody's ever done this before. I thought, well, that's weird because it's such an important factor in how much we enjoy our work. And I saw it, so much of the gossip and the conflicts and the misunderstandings in the workplace all came down because everyone thought they were living by the value of respect. Very few people were intentionally disrespectful. That's very rare. It's usually done out of vengeance where they think they were harmed first. But if you think you're being disrespected, odds are they either think you've already done it to them or they don't even agree with your definition of respect. And in their world, they're doing just fine. But if you sit down with someone and you go, here's what it means to respect me. Are you okay with that? And they go, yes, point 1, 2, 3, that's exactly what I agree with. And then the next day they do the opposite. That is intentional disrespect. They knew what it meant to you and they said, fuck you anyway. That's an important piece of information about a person. It means, hey, this person's not good to have around. They breach agreements. They're distrustful. They betray me. But somebody who just treats you in a way you don't like, for them, that might be a great way to behave. That might be what they were raised with. You might be too sensitive. I know a lot of people whose definition of respect is quite unreasonable. Like obedience. No, someone doesn't have to obey you to be respectful. Someone doesn't have to agree with you to be respectful. But a lot of people have that definition. And they found if they sat down and talked with someone and said, hey, for you to be respectful, I need you to do everything I say. That person's going to go, no, that's not reasonable. And you're going to have a confrontation and you're going to figure out a reasonable agreement. Then, if they breach the agreement, now you're talking about disrespect. But before that, you're just talking about guesswork and assumptions.
That's a great place to start the conversation too. Is one of the best examples of this I've seen is I had one friend who was raised by a military dad, military brat kid, lived in a world of extreme discipline, Dave Goggins style discipline. Another friend who was raised by hippie parents, they ended up being next door neighbors. They were night and day different, and they really, really struggled and also embraced those differences. But understanding that someone else's worldview, their understanding of how relationships are supposed to work, their understanding of how human dynamics work best, their understanding of give and take and relationships and honesty and respect and all these terms and definitions, it's going to be different for everyone. So simply starting with that point, that understanding that, hey, I feel really uncomfortable. There are definitely emotions arising for me. Let's explore that. I want to have a talk with this person and just share what I'm feeling and help get their perspective on what happened in this interaction. Probably learn a lot about them in the process. They'll learn a lot about you. They'll learn a lot about themselves. You'll learn a lot about yourself. And all of this is going to make you both better people.
Exactly. I mean, I often say confrontations are probably one of the most helpful things that happen in a relationship when they're done well, because they always take it to the next level if it helps you learn the person and yourself better. I think the main point I'd like to finish on is the idea that you cannot enforce a boundary that hasn't been set. So you cannot punish someone or hold them to account for breaching something that you never talked through with them, an agreement that you came to on your own. You can't come into a relationship with a preset definition of respect and then hold them to account to that. That's really unreasonable. It would be unreasonable if they did it to you as well. And you'll notice people doing it to you. They say, I can't believe you didn't get that done by 5 o'clock. And you're like, dude, you didn't ask me to get it done by 5 o'clock. How could you expect that? And that's where the confrontation begins. Why would you think I'd know what you want without you telling me? Would you want me to do that to you? And you start to talk through what it means. And the thing is, this isn't going to be a single conversation. You may need to do it every day if they're quite a forgetful or disrespectful person. Or there'll be just so many nuances and variations that come up, so many different situations that don't have a precedent that you have to go, okay, in this situation, we have to do this, this, and this. So many people are so uncomfortable with that conversation that they never have it when you need to be having it all the time. It needs to be one of the most common conversation types that you engage in. This is what I want. This is what I mean. This is what I'm really thinking. What do you think? What's the best way for us to move forward? People will go their whole lives without having that conversation and wonder why they're constantly in conflict. Because people have that conversation often, the conflicts are rare and far between.
I absolutely agree. It reminds me of when I was a kid. I never was into sports, never had anyone to teach me sports. When I get invited over to a baseball game, I had no idea how the rules worked. I'd run the wrong way around the bases. I didn't know that I was supposed to catch the ball or which position did what, had no clue. And the other kids were really frustrated with that. It's like, how come you're doing it all wrong? Just didn't know. And it took some time for me to actually learn, there are rules. This is how it's supposed to work. This is what makes everyone else comfortable, that there's a process and a framework and structure. But we don't all have that knowledge. We all come from a different place. And understanding that is fundamental to all the relationships you'll ever be in will really help.
Absolutely. I think the assumptions we make about other people, we put them into the category of evil when actually they probably think they're doing the right thing and they have good intentions. It's very rare that someone's trying to hurt you. Odds are their primary intention is something else. They're trying to achieve a goal. They're trying to live by their own rules. They're trying to be a good person or something like that. You're not that important to become someone's target of suffering. So keep in mind, I think most poor treatment that you receive is actually a misunderstanding of some kind. And at least if it isn't, then confronting and setting boundaries will tell you about those rare exceptions where, no, I've got a psychopath or a narcissist actually trying to hurt me now. That's very different from someone who's just got poor communication skills or bad expectations or anything like that can be resolved. Awesome. Thank you guys for your questions. keep sending them through. info@brojo.org if you want to send them through, or brojo.org/ask. There's a little form you can fill out there. And of course, get in touch with us anytime if we can help. And if you want your questions answered as a priority, join our gold membership and get all the perks and privileges there as well.